Greg, aka Crazy G from NECR New England Concert Reviews, and we are here once again, and today I have what I would like to consider a guitar genius. He is none other than Jesse Cook, and let me first start off by saying welcome. It's a pleasure, and thanks for taking the time to talk with us here at NECR. How are you?
I'm good. My God, Greg, after that introduction, I got to say, thank you, good night. Where do I go from there, Greg? That's crazy. Crazy talk. Genius. I don't know what you mean.
Well,
very kind of you.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I checked out your newest CD, and we'll get into that. You really are. Jesse Cook, to me, is masterful at what you do. And if you could briefly tell us a little bit about your background as a guitar virtuoso.
I started playing when I was very young. My mom says I was 2, but I didn't really get lessons till I was about 6. When I was very young, we were moving around Europe. My parents were Canadian, but they were living in Europe. So we lived in France. I was born in Paris. We moved to Barcelona. Apparently I had a toy guitar, but it wasn't until we moved to Canada that I got lessons at 6. And then from there, I just started studying it, playing it. And I didn't really think of it as something I was going to do for a living. I just thought of it as something I did because I loved it. And then, when I got out of high school, I was actually applying to Parsons School of Art and Design in New York. I thought I was going to be an artist because I had an uncle who's a famous Canadian artist, and I really admired him and wanted to be like him. But my girlfriend at the time sort of took me aside and said, your music is really great, and your art, not so much. So you might want to reconsider. So I took a year off and sort of went completely into music and, studied piano and composition and all of that, and then realized, okay, this is what I want to do. And so I went off to York University and then eventually Berkeley, and now this is what I do, and I love it. It's a pretty fun way to make a living, I have to say. You get to see the world, you get to chase your muse. It's pretty awesome.
I would love to have that opportunity if I could just play an instrument. Let's get right into the CD. You have a new CD, Beyond Borders, and to me, it is a true piece of art, and it is about via Entertainment One music. What do you want to tell us about this sensational CD?
Well, thank you. You know what? I mean, for me, this CD is just me trying to make the music that I hear in my head that I love. I think like most people, I'm also a music listener. I'm constantly listening, searching for something that I really like, and I often can't find the thing I really want. And so I just think, you know what? I'm going to make it. I'm going to sit down and write that kind of music. And for me, I grew up in Toronto, which is a very multicultural city. It's apparently, the government's always saying, it's the most multicultural city in the world. I don't know if that's true, but it's a place where there's no one group that's in the majority. You've got people from all over the world. It's like, I think, the largest Asian city in the world outside of Asia, the 3rd largest Caribbean city, including cities in the Caribbean. So, the 1st largest is Kingston, Jamaica, 2nd is Havana, Cuba, and the 3rd is Toronto, Canada. There's just all sorts of different, ethnicities. And so as a kid growing up here, I was constantly being invited to play in other types of musical genres. There was a West African drumming master who asked me to join his group for a while and play drums, and learn those traditional rhythms. And I did that, and I loved it. And and I think there's about 5 or 6 samba schools, like Brazilian samba schools here in Toronto. And at one point, one of them said, you should come and play with us for a while. It's a lot of fun, and I did that. And I went and learned all those beautifully orchestrated Brazilian rhythms, or I studied North Indian tabla one summer. And so when I sit down to make a record, the idea of just kind of using a boring old drum kit and a bass player or something, it doesn't sound like it's as much fun to me as getting 50 guys playing huge drums, you know what I mean? And using all those amazing rhythms from Brazil, or using rhythms from Cuba or Africa or wherever, just kind of mixing it all together and seeing what you can create, taking things that are old and trying to make something completely new, adding electronica, mashing it up with the Spanish guitar or the Armenian duduk or, the Chinese erhu, whatever, just kind of seeing what you can make that gets the hairs to stand up on the back of my neck.
There's so many fabulous songs on it. The self-titled track, Beyond Borders, sets the pace for the CD from the start. What was the overall process like for this song being the self-titled track?
Well, I have to admit, it wasn't going to, I didn't know what the name of it was when I wrote it because, I'm writing instrumental music, so there are no lyrics. And so the titles are really the last part of the process. The song is sort of mixed and mastered, and then I finally decide, okay, what's a good name for this thing? What's some title that's to be evocative without kind of grounding it. And, with this song, though, there was something special about that song, Beyond Borders, for me, which was, I had written a good portion of the album and produced it. And I wrote most of that song, Beyond Borders, a year ago, like last summer, not this summer that just passed. And I kind of liked it. I'd written the guitar parts. I'd even written some vocals for it. But I wasn't totally sure about the vocals because I had sung the vocals myself. And, I kind of knew that I wanted something that sounded kind of like Egyptian singing because I'd been in Egypt and I'd heard these guys sort of singing in the kind of subway tunnels, where there'll be like one guy at the end of the tunnel and another guy at the other end, and there'll be, one of them will do this long singing thing where he sings for 30 seconds or whatever, and the sound of it just echoes down the hall, and then when he finishes, the next guy starts and he does his thing, and that sound echoes around, and I remember just getting chills, and I wanted something like that in the song, so I kind of faked it myself, and it just wasn't, the right thing for the track. And I have a friend who's a great Egyptian singer who I've worked with before. I called her up and she came in and recorded her part, and somehow just having her beautiful voice, this sort of soaring female voice in there kind of lifted the track, and it kind of put the rest of the songs on the album to shame, and it became like that song, Beyond Borders, sort of became the track to beat, you know what I mean? So I kind of kept measuring everything else against that, going, is this song as good as Beyond Borders yet? And no, not yet. Okay, but take it back to the drawing board and work on it, So it definitely, it kind of set the tone. I think it was kind of the blueprint for where I wanted the CD to go.
Well, Double Dutch is one of my favorites off of Beyond Borders. How did that song come to light, and how did you approach it from a musical standpoint?
You know what? That song was actually, I wrote it improvised, messing around with a loop station. So about a year and a half ago, I was at home and I was recording, just doing a loop, where you know what a loop station is, a little pedal board, you plug your guitar in, and you just start playing things and recording them into it and looping little, 4 bars or 8 bars. And, I sort of had a microphone and I did some clapping and, banged the guitar a little bit, great percussion sounds, and created this loop, looped it up, kind of improvised the song, and it all just came out. The whole song was done. Like 3 minutes later, the loop was done and the song was done. And I thought, oh, that's pretty good, and I recorded it into the machine so that it kept it, saved it, as opposed to, just turning the machine off and the thing disappears. And then kind of about a year later, I went back and found those old loops and I pulled them into the studio and dropped it on a computer and kind of fleshed it out, turned it into a big song. And it, I think a few things changed, but most of it was there. And, I kept going back to the original tape. I'd sort of try to improve it, having all sorts of other instruments at my disposal. I sort of thought, well, let's do this, let's do that. And then I kept kind of preferring the original loop, going back to that and going, well, let's just go with that then. If it sounded good, it sounded good. So that's what it ends up being. It's a sort of kind of a bit of an organic thing, I think, at the beginning, banging on the guitar and clapping in my hands and, creating a sort of an organic rhythm. But then you get to the chorus and it's got that big Brazilian drum sound that sort of takes over and gives it a bit more of a kind of a big groove.
That's how I felt with it. It had this groovy, I'm digging this. Another fantastic track is Above the Rain. Quickly, what's the story behind that track?
It's funny. I don't even know what to say about some of them. I mean, some of them are really just a kind of I guess because they're instrumental songs, I'm not always writing about anything in particular. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I'm sort of, my baby left me and now I'm, drinking to the bottom of this whiskey bottle or whatever. I'm not singing about anything here. I'm just kind of playing with music and Above the Rain, was just kind of messing around with technology and the guitar. And I love it when you take kind of that old Spanish guitar and you mix it with something that's very modern and a little bit electronic, and it sort of feels a bit like, it's kind of like history passing through the eye of a needle or something, that you've got all these different time periods represented in one piece of music. And I should say that there's a violin solo, I think, on that is played by my friend Vasil Papaduk, he's a kind of virtuoso Ukrainian violinist, amazing guy. And he was, I sort of thought, oh, it'd be nice to get Vasil on this. I wonder where he is, because half the time he's off touring Russia or somewhere. And I called him up. He says, yes, Jesse, I'm on my way to Toronto right now in my car. I'll be there in 3 hours. And he just drives over and we do this recording. And then from there, he drove right out to the airport and left on tour for somewhere. So it just was meant to be, I guess.
That's so cool. And Jesse Cook has an upcoming tour starting on September 22nd. What can you tell us about this tour?
Well, Well, the tour is going to be a mixture of new and old. I mean, certainly we're going to be playing some songs from the new CD because, this is the Beyond Borders tour. But at the same time, at this point, I have actually 10 CDs under my belt. And I realize, when people come out to see us, some of them, you may only have one. Maybe they've just got Gravity or Tempest or one of my old CDs. So I try to get to, songs from every CD. I don't always succeed, but, it's going to be a kind of a range of different stuff. But of course, we're going to focus on some of the new stuff too, for sure. And then, of course, when we do these shows, I always hope that people are going to, bring their dancing shoes. And we're going to have a bit of a Roomba party by the end of the night. That's usually what I'm hoping for.
Your sound is magical, and it seems Jesse Cook has really done so much with the music and your experience in a very short amount of time. What would you say is the hardest part of making music for you, and or your favorite part of making music?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I sort of feel like music is its own reward. I mean, I love music. It's always been a part of my life. It is something that I turn to, in difficult times. I think most people turn to music, if they're feeling blue or whatever, they put on some hurting music and it makes you feel better, and I feel that way about music where, I'll sit down and play the guitar because it makes me feel better. The best thing that music is it's that thing. And it's so hard to describe. I think it's a kind of uniquely human thing. Why it is that we love music and why it is that music affects us so much, I don't know, but it does. And getting to do that as what you do every day just to make a living is a real blessing.
Yeah, it was there for me when I needed it. And I think the reward of it is the finished product that you create as an artist. But, in the same aspect, like anything you do in life, whether you're working on an assembly line, whether you're working behind a desk, whether you're working on stage, it's not always going to be perfect. So that's kind of why I asked if there was a hard part to making music for yourself.
Certainly being a musician, there are parts that are, can be difficult. Traveling all the time, being away from your family all the time. It's not the music that you ever, find difficult, but the other things that you have to do in order to be able to do music can make it difficult. Just being away from your kids, not getting to be there at every one of those great moments that you'd like to be there for your kids. Like if you miss a piano recital or whatever and you don't get to see that, you sort of feel like, oh, that's too bad. But at the same time, that's how I support them and that's what I have to do. But, for me, it's never been the music that's difficult. It's just, the other part, sort of sitting on a tour bus on a rainy afternoon in, some town you don't know and maybe going, when do I get to go home and see my family? That's the hard part, I would say.
I read some of your press and pretty cool that you mentioned, you were doing some work at home, and this kind of goes into this past question and even this next question, how he was fooling around on your laptop and he created sounds for you where you said, hey, wait, stop, wait a minute. I consider you being neck and neck with some of the greats. Carlos Santana being just one that comes to my mind off the top for myself. Jesse Cook's vast range of musical attributes encompasses quite a variety. Bringing what your son did into this, how do you even begin the writing process for a song? I understand it's acoustic. You have to do, you have to write your chords, your chorus, and stuff like that. I think that would also go into the hard part of making music. You see where I'm going with this?
For sure. You know what? I think one of the difficulties I've had is that, when I first started, that first album, Tempest, it was easy, right? I mean, it was, a lifetime of playing the guitar and learning things, and you just want to kind of do your best work and record it and get it out there. And then the second CD, you're going, okay, great. I've got a CD and an audience that's waiting to find out what I'm going to do next, and you make your next CD, and, you sort of express, okay, well, here's some other ideas that I have. But by the time you're on your 10th CD, you've really kind of expressed a lot of those things, and you don't want to do them again. I don't want to make another Tempest. I don't want to do, more music that sounds like Vertigo or the Roomba Foundation or whatever. And my way of always trying to keep music fresh is I try to put myself in an uncomfortable situation. I try to do the writing process in a different way. So, if I did my last album just sitting on the guitar, maybe, this album I'll say, okay, put the guitar down and do something else. Start playing with synthesizers and see where that leads you. And then, eventually I will pick up the guitar, but now I'm coming at it from a different point of view, or go and work with people that you hadn't worked with before. And, with the Roomba Foundation, I went down to Colombia and, started working with guys there who had a type of music that I knew very little about. I loved what they did, but, it wasn't my music, and it was certainly outside my comfort zone. But when you go and you work with other people and sort of put yourself in a situation where you've got to learn and you've got to figure things out, you immediately aren't sort of falling back on the things that you're comfortable doing. You end up discovering new things, and that for me has always been really exciting. I always try to keep pushing the boundaries of what I do and how I do it, because I sort of feel like that's an artist's job. The artist's job is to keep breaking the rules, and once you learn the rules, you break them. You try something new, and I just hope I can keep doing that forever.
I'm very interested in knowing who might be some of your musical influences, and what do you take from them, if anything, that you might use in your style of music? I know you mentioned some of the drums there and the rumba and stuff like that, but do you take anything from, say, a rock band or a pop band or a contemporary band or an alternative band?
Oh yeah, no, for sure I do. I think every record has been somewhat influenced by some part of pop music, because pop music is much maligned because it's pop music. It's kind of like the musical equivalent of sugar. It tastes really good, but it's not always very complicated, which isn't a bad thing. My feeling is some of my favorite music has been pop music. I love the Beatles. I'm a huge Peter Gabriel fan. I love the Police, Pink Floyd. It doesn't matter. There's so many great pop artists. I'm a Leonard Cohen fan. Bob Dylan. Where do you stop?
David Bowie.
I was listening to a lot of recent pop artists. I actually really like what Ed Sheeran is doing. I think he's somebody who also works with loops with his guitar and voice, and he ends up with some quite sparse arrangements because that's how he produces the music, I think. And I actually learned a lot. I hate to say it, but here's this kid. I don't know how old he is. He's probably in his 20s, I'm guessing. And I sort of feel like as much as I've learned at this point, do I need to learn from a 20-year-old? Well, yeah. I thought I like what he did, and I think he's got a great sort of musical sensibility, and it affected how I was writing and how I was thinking about my arrangements when I was doing the recording. A few albums ago, Adele was somebody I was listening to. It's funny because I was listening to other people too, like Lasse de Sela or Miles Davis or Kurt Weill, but it's that thing where if you're doing an interview and you mentioned I was listening to the new Adele, the gravitational force of the weight of these big pop stars is it'll end up kind of taking over. People will sort of put the headline out the next day, Cook influenced by Adele, and you sort of go, well, yeah, she was on the list. Miles was probably higher up, but it's that thing where often I will be reluctant to talk about my pop influences just because I sort of feel like they end up getting, maybe in some cases, more credit than they deserve. Not to say that they're not great, but just that they're not everything in what I'm doing, certainly.
No, and it seems, and we're not just focusing on pop either. It seems you pull a lot from a lot of different genres and styles of music, and it's really amazing to hear your finished product. Like I said, when I reviewed the CD Beyond Borders, I was I just closed my eyes and it just felt so right and so natural. And
thank you.
We discussed quite a bit. Is there anything else we haven't touched upon, and anything else in the future for Jesse Cook that we might not know about that you could share with us?
Something that people haven't really talked about much in the past is, both of my parents were filmmakers, and my father was a feature filmmaker in Europe, and my mother was a television producer and director. She did a show up here in Canada that would be sold in the United States as Nova, so people down there would probably know her more from those types of shows, sort of documentaries about science. In recent years, I've actually started making my own music videos, which might sound kind of odd. At first, it was really just kind of a fun hobby, because I always liked photography, and sort of thought, gee, I wonder if I can do this. And I started making them, and they've become more and more serious over the years, and I've got more and more into it. Since this album came out, I've actually produced 3 music videos. The first one was for Double Dutch, which you mentioned earlier. The second one I did when I was in France over the summer for a song called Lost. And then the last one, we haven't released it yet, but I went down to Cartagena in Colombia because a friend of mine invited me, come down, let's make a video for our song. He and I had written a song together. And we went down and we produced a big music video down there. And I did all the filming and the editing and the whole thing. And I have to say, it's something that people don't really think about because it's not related to my guitar playing. But because I'm making videos about the music, it's something I'm really proud of and really enjoy. And I also think that, when I'm making videos, I'm making them different. They seem quite different to me than other music videos I see. And I think part of it is because there's more focus on the actual, you can see the arrangement. You know what I mean? Like the way I'm cutting the things I'm focusing on, you can actually see all the parts, all the players playing the various parts that fit together. Whereas often, if I watch a Beyonce video, it's all about her dancing, and the actual music is just a backdrop to that. So I don't know. For people who are interested in that, I would encourage you to, sort of go to my Facebook page or whatever and look for it. You'll probably find links, or I think I have a YouTube page too, and you can see the videos I've done. At this point, I think I've done about 8 or 9 total, 3 for this album, but more for some of the earlier ones.
Awesome.
So there you go.
No, I'm going to have to check that out. That's definitely something I didn't know and I didn't catch while checking over your press and stuff. I'm going to have to definitely look into that. That sounds very interesting. And yeah, I can see I can kind of see where you're coming from with that. Ladies and gentlemen, the insatiable, incredible guitar virtuoso, Jesse Cook. At this time, I want to thank you for talking to us here at NECR New England Concert Reviews. I wish you the best with your career, with Beyond Borders, this tour, with everything you do, because it sounds like you love what you do and you produce some really great stuff. I hope to hear a lot more coming from you.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for doing this. It was a real pleasure.
Anytime, man. And again, good luck and all the best.
All right. Thank you, Greg.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Ladies and gentlemen, the masterful guitar virtuoso, Jesse Cook. Check out his new CD, Beyond Borders. That's going to wrap this one up. Another one in the books. This is Greg, a.k.a. Crazy G, for NECR New England Concert Reviews, and I'll be coming back. Later. Peace.